So Naama Krauz is, in fact, a Navy spouse, an author, a mother of 3, an ESL instructor, and also, of late, a Sunday and Hebrew school teacher here in our own community in Spokane. She attended the University of Michigan, go Blue. I'm also a Michigander, and as well as Old Dominion University. She was born in Israel, grew up in the US, and has been stationed all over the world. Her writing has been published by Kveller, militaryspouse.com, and medium.com, among other outlets, and she's appeared in numerous articles as well and interviews about military family life in general, and specifically Jewish military family life. According to her own bios online, she enjoys sharing adventures with her family, reading, baking, and social media scrolling. Don't we all? She and her family belong to TBS and live in Lata Valley. And I'm truly pleased that Naama could be here with us today to talk about her family's intersecting identities as a Jewish family and a military family. She'll present for 15, 20 minutes or so, and then we can open it up for questions. But as she presents, if you'd like to put questions in the chat, you could certainly do that, and I'll catch them if she doesn't. So without further ado, Naama, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here with you guys today. I'm having some technical difficulties on my end. I'm hoping my computer will eventually decide to connect. I have that spinning wheel of death happening right now. I did pull together lots of pictures to give you guys a good visual. I am very much a visual learner, and I thought that everyone could use some visual images to go with what I was telling you, but I don't, oh, maybe, no, now it just said no, not at all. Okay, all right. Well, Neil, thank you so much for that very warm introduction. We found ourselves here in Spokane about a year ago, just over a year ago. My husband is in the Navy, and he was chosen for a program where the Navy is sending him to obtain his PhD, and it had to satisfy leadership, ethics, and law. And they said, okay, go find a program you want. You have 4 years to complete a PhD, go. And he ended up really liking what Gonzaga's leadership program, oh, maybe I'm in. Yay! Oh, I was Sharon. All right, let's see if I can switch over to my computer. Can you hear me?
Currently?
Oh, hold on, there's 2.
How about now?
Yes, we can hear you. We do have some feedback.
Yes. Let's see. I will exit this one.
Sounds good.
There we go.
Perfect.
Is that better?
Yes. Plus, we get the wall art.
But now we cannot hear you.
You're not hearing?
Oh, no. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, we'll do it this way. Fantastic. Sorry for the technical difficulties. So we have been here in Spokane for about a year, and we've been slowly getting to know the synagogue, and we've received such a warm welcome, and it's been so lovely. So we've had quite the world experience prior to landing here in Spokane, and I can tell you that an international move during a pandemic is not one I would recommend. It was incredibly challenging, but one that we had to do. When Uncle Sam says you are moving, you move. And that's that. So here we are. I will see if I can get my photos, and I have share screen. Let's see if it will let me. Oh, you have to allow screen sharing. Okay. And I will start talking as we figure this out. My husband and I met a few years ago via JDate. If any of you are familiar with JDate, it is the Jewish like Match.com subsidiary. We both were pretty intent on marrying Jews. And so we met one another through JDate. I knew nothing about the military or the Navy whatsoever prior to meeting him. So that was quite a shock, shall we say. Let's expand this for you. Can everybody see that picture? If you can give me a thumbs up, that'd be great. Awesome. So we met a few years ago in the Washington, D.C. area. I had graduated from Michigan and moved to Virginia, Alexandria, Virginia. I was teaching a little further south in Prince William County, Virginia. And my husband at the time, who had graduated from the United States Naval Academy, which is in Annapolis, Maryland, was now working at the academy, doing numerous different jobs throughout his time there. We got married in 2008, and this is the Jewish chapel at the Naval Academy, which was a very big deal. He was instrumental in helping get the ball rolling for building this chapel. And there's still currently, the fund that runs it is the Friends of the Jewish Chapel, the FOJC, and they were able to erect this beautiful, beautiful chapel that, as you can see, is clearly a very dedicated Jewish space for midshipmen at the Naval Academy. So gone were the days of marching midshipmen into town to church every week. This was now a place where Jewish midshipmen could attend synagogue Friday nights. You can see they use Jerusalem stone as the main back wall of the chapel. And what you can't see is just how high the chapel really goes. It is also the ethics center for the university. And there's a fellowship hall right across from this chapel. We were the fourth wedding to take place in this chapel. Our good friends were the very first. So it was a very meaningful place for us to get married, to start our lives as a Jewish military family. We then moved to Newport, Rhode Island for 6 months, where my husband was in department head school. Here we were on the grounds of the Newport mansions, which are beautiful. If you ever get a chance, they called them summer cottages. They are anything but cottages. But we enjoyed our time as newlyweds in Newport, actually getting to know the Jewish community in Providence. As soon as we moved there, we needed to find a good synagogue for us, even though we were only there for 6 months. And at first, the synagogue we found, the community was a little not so willing to invite us in, knowing we were only there for 6 months. We were certainly welcome to come to services, but our peers were a little less excited to get to know us. Because they said, 6 months, what's the point in getting to know somebody for 6 months? We wore them down because that's what we do best. And they are still lifelong friends of ours. We made this wonderful group of friends. We were all newlyweds, all trying to figure out how to be adults together. We now, amongst all of us, have lots of children. And it was really such a beautiful experience for us to experience as our first Jewish lives, away from home, away from school, away from work. Next, the Navy moved us to Hawaii. This was our lanai in Kailua, Hawaii. My husband was stationed in Pearl Harbor aboard the USS Chung Hoon, which is a ship named after the first Hawaiian admiral. It was a beautiful place to live. However, my husband deployed 2 weeks after we landed. I moved into this house the day I drove him to the airport to fly and meet the ship in Singapore. This specific picture was taken from a Rosh Hashanah dinner that we enjoyed, that we were able to enjoy out on our lanai, and those sun streams coming through the clouds just really spoke to me that Erev Rosh Hashanah of, what the new year was all about. We met one other Jewish couple with whom we were very close in Hawaii. The Jewish community in Hawaii was difficult. We had a lay leader who wasn't so invested in active duty military and servicing active duty military. In fact, he wasn't even sponsored by the accrediting groups that usually sponsor Jewish lay leaders. So it was a bit troubling and frustrating to have that experience. Despite that, we still made Judaism a very integral part of our lives. I grew up keeping kosher. I continued to maintain a kosher home despite living in Hawaii, where kosher meat is not really an option. The Safeway down the street happened to carry kosher chicken occasionally and kosher turkey over Thanksgiving. And truthfully, I'm not a huge meat eater, so that worked just fine. A fish heavy diet worked for me, but there were definitely some challenges. I did jump into the Reform synagogue that was there and start teaching religious school there. I did that for 1 year, and that was an interesting experience. And the best way I can capture that for you is that a fist fight broke out at a congregational meeting. So suffice it to say, after that 1 year, I said, enough, I am not interested in continuing here any longer. It wasn't very aloha for the land of aloha. It was very shocking, but quite the discordant community there. And unfortunately, despite the Hawaiian culture being incredibly welcoming, the Jewish community there just wasn't really a great fit for us. But what that also meant, and I know this is a very blurry picture because that's what happens when you take a picture of your computer screen when you're very excited. Being stationed so far from family means celebrating Jewish holidays alone and without being surrounded by your family. And it also means sharing really great news via a computer screen. And this was us on Hanukkah, me desperately wanting to show my mom what I got my husband for Hanukkah, and that was a positive pregnancy test. So this was my mom's reaction to finding out that she was going to be a grandmother, which had we been in person, maybe I wouldn't have been able to capture this image, and it's just such a fun one to look back on. But something to keep in mind that, you know, Jewish military, all military families, but especially Jewish families that want nothing more than to celebrate with a community. This is a sacrifice that we've been making our entire lives as a married couple, and we've been married about 13 and a half years now. Our oldest, Yael, was born in July of 2011. My husband was deployed. He was floating somewhere in the East China Sea when she was born. He deployed when I was 30 weeks pregnant. I didn't know how I could get through it, but I did. Turns out I'm a pretty strong person. And you do what you have to do when the time comes. The baby was not going to stay put for 4 more months. So out she came. And pictured here is the daddy doll. This is something that lots of military families have of their active duty spouses. Something that kids can hug, sometimes something the parents can hug when they need it. And it's also something that your kids can get familiar with the face that they don't see for months and months on end. There are many instances where kids are pretty afraid of the parent who comes home from deployment. They don't know who you are. And I didn't want that to happen. So right from day one, I made sure to have his face around and something squishy, even though obviously at this point she didn't even know she had hands, but something that she could hold on to that would connect her to her dad. Thanks to the then technology, the friend who was with me as I was delivering her was able to call my husband's ship, and he was on the phone to hear when she was born. I forgot he was on the phone, and when she put him up to my ear to talk to me after she was born and she was laying on my chest, I said, hello, who am I talking to? I'm a little busy right now. I can't talk. Completely forgetting that, yes, that's my husband listening on the phone. The ship pulled into Singapore about 3 weeks later, and they allowed him to fly home for about 2 days, which ended up being about 24 hours of travel on each end to be home for the 2 days to meet Yael. So here is Matt meeting Yael for the first time when she was 3 weeks old. It was very important to us to give our children Hebrew names. We wanted them from the very beginning to know they are Jewish. They come from a proud Jewish family and proud Jewish heritage. And I think we knew what we were getting ourselves into with that, being in a military community. It's been a learning experience for us all, however. So this is when she was 3 weeks old. Matt came home from deployment when she was 4 months old. So he had been deployed for 6 months, and he jumped right in. And Yael had no problem going to him, which I was so thankful about. And he and when she was 4 months old, he started learning, oh, okay, I'm a parent now. He missed the majority of the nonstop crying. She never stopped crying. So how do you do Jewish without having a Jewish community of your own? Thankfully, I am an educator. I have a bachelor's, a master's degree in education, and I know the importance of having realia and having things around for your kids to connect with, and for starting these Jewish traditions very, very early. I grew up attending a Jewish day school, so my Jewish roots are deep. I have, thankfully, a pretty solid base of Jewish knowledge, but now I needed to relate that to my kids. And how do you do that when there's ostensibly no Jewish community to help nurture them? So I had lots of things at home that babies and little kids could then turn to figure out, what is this? This is a shofar. When do we use it? Oh, mommy, you only take that out for Rosh Hashanah. Yes, that's right. So, once an educator, always an educator. This is Yael celebrating her first Hanukkah in Hawaii. We found out we were expecting her, remember, the year prior. So this was quite a fun Hanukkah for us. Same dining room table, different location. You'll notice a different house in the background. When Yael, right before Yael turned 1, we moved to Virginia Beach, Virginia. My husband was getting his 3rd master's degree, I think, at the Navy War College through the Norfolk program there. So we were living in Virginia Beach, and we were very thankful to be able to buy challah in a store, and B, this was Yael's first taste of honey for Rosh Hashanah, because you cannot give babies under a year honey. So this was a very exciting and important moment for her. But we found ourselves in this incredible Jewish community. There was this synagogue that welcomed us in with open arms. What you can't tell here is that I am about 14 or 15 weeks pregnant with baby number 2. And the synagogue had lots of great young families going through the same young family stuff right along with us. There was an incredible JCC that had adult programs, kid programs, a gym, childcare, just an incredible experience for us. But still, we were far from family. And while this is very familiar to all of us now, this was not a familiar thing for most Americans at the time. Hugs for grandma via the computer. My husband was home for baby number 2, and he was quite shocked by the whole birthing process, but thankfully he did not pass out. This is Dahlia, who was born President's Day weekend of 2013, made it to the hospital just in time. She came about 30 minutes after we checked in. And I love this picture because you can just see how in awe Matt was of finally, being there for the birth of a child. As I said, the JCC was amazing. I was born in Israel, yet my first camel ride was in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Every year, the JCC would throw a huge Yom HaAtzmaut party, camels and all. And it was just such a lovely place for us to raise our children, to have this experience as a Jewish family surrounded by this incredibly strong Jewish community. But the Navy laughed and said, we know you've been in Virginia for 11 months, but you're going back to Hawaii. And here's a little preview of another little person coming to join us in Hawaii. I mean, no complaints about living in Hawaii. It's really a gorgeous place. Eliana joined us in November of 2014. The last baby that we will have. 3 proud Jewish girls. They all are very close. They all love each other very much, and we are very fortunate. And the 3rd baby to meet her great grandparents via the computer screen. This past summer, we were fortunate enough to be able to go home, and our kids have 4 living great grandparents. We were able to, the 5th one just passed away about a year ago, so it's pretty incredible. We were able to finally get that family time in person. But this is a huge sacrifice, and I wish more civilians understood just how much is missed when we're not surrounded by our families, especially during those important Jewish life milestone events. Imagine my surprise one day when I was driving on the Marine Corps base and this huge menorah was there outside of the chapel. The military tried to do a few small things here and there. Usually only Hanukkah was acknowledged, but it was something, and it was a symbol there. We made sure to take our kids to whatever programs were available, but as a mom of 3 kids under 4, I think, yeah, it was 3 kids, 3 and under, and my husband gone almost all of the time. I can tell you that I've been ostensibly solo parenting for the first 9 years of parenthood. This past year and a half of COVID has actually been a blessing for our family because my husband has been home. And it's the first time I've been able to say, you put the kids to bed. But when we had the opportunity to join whatever Jewish community was present, we jumped right in. Here's an example of more crafts I did with my kids, something that is appropriate for toddlers. Ripping paper and placing stickers is fantastic for those fine motor skill developments for little kids. And again, once an educator, always an educator. How can I get my kids excited about Jewish life without having that Jewish community? Well, we can still do things at home. And then we moved to Japan. If you thought there's no Jewish community in Hawaii, let me tell you about Japan. Japan is an amazing country, and if you ever get a chance to visit, I highly recommend it. It is beautiful. We made incredible memories. Being Jewish was a struggle. There was no kosher meat whatsoever. Occasionally, the commissary would get some in, but it was of the organic variety, which meant that the kosher turkeys they offered during Thanksgiving were literally $100. That is pretty unattainable for most military families. In fact, many enlisted military families are on food stamps, and $100 turkey is just not an option. My husband was the executive officer of the USS Antietam. That is a whole story that you can get into with him at a much later time. This tour was incredibly difficult on us. There was an incident with his ship that was front page of CNN. You can Google it and find out what it was. And shortly thereafter, about 6 months later, was the USS Fitzgerald collision, followed shortly by the USS McCain collision. Both ships also stationed out of Yokosuka, Japan, where we were. Both captains were neighbors and good friends of ours and were incredibly difficult for all of us in our community to get through. We lost 17 sailors in those 2 collisions. Luckily in Yokosuka, we had this gentleman in the khaki uniform. That is Rabbi Steve Balaban. The military has very few Jewish chaplains, and we are very, very fortunate when we happen to be stationed in a place where there is one. Rabbi Balaban was stationed at Atsugi, which was about 45 minutes away from us. He would come down to our base quarterly, and this was a Passover Seder. So whenever the rabbi would come to Yokosuka, all of the surrounding bases would come, any Jews from those bases would come for these large events. And it was always incredible, but it was like once a quarter. Here's a lighting Havdalah candles with Rabbi Balaban. Lighting Hanukkah candles. Again, we had lots of people come from Camp Zama, which is an army base, Yokota Air Force Base. Rabbi Balaban was also responsible for bases up in Misawa, all the way north in Japan, and Okinawa, which is an island about 400 miles south of mainland Japan. So he had to service quite a number of, not so many in number, but in geographic location. Something I want to point out here, the people in the background, 3 of them, are Messianic. We had a significant problem with Jews for Jesus in Yokosuka. And And it's an issue that I think Jewish sailors and families deal with frequently. The mom tried to take over as the Jewish lay leader of our base chapel. And she also, and her husband tried to become the Jewish lay leader on our aircraft carrier, the USS Ronald Reagan. Thankfully, Rabbi Balaban stepped in and said, no, absolutely not. You are not Jewish. She was the head of the Christian homeschool network on base. And it was shocking to me that somebody who was so clearly Christian was trying to purport herself, her children, and her family to be Jewish. This was an uphill struggle. It continues to be an uphill struggle. This is a common problem in the military. They would frequently separate our single sailors from us, take them out to dinner, and then try to talk to them about Jesus. What do you know about Jesus? Have you tried welcoming Jesus in your lives? And these are young 18-year-old impressionable sailors who are looking for familiarity. They're looking for family. They're looking for somebody to be a comfort to them while they're doing something really, really stressful. It's a challenge. If you couldn't buy challah in Hawaii, you definitely couldn't buy challah in Japan. But lucky for me, a girlfriend of mine wrote a Jewish breads cookbook. And here I would make challah every Shabbat. And soon my neighbors would come knocking and say, hey, I know what you have in there. These are, I have two. On top are pumpkin spice challahs. And the bottom three are pesto goat cheese stuffed challah. We enjoy our challah. I became the challah gal. And this was an awesome thing for me to really do, despite the time that it takes to make challah. Every Shabbat, filling my home with the smell of challah baking, my kids were able to associate, oh, it's Shabbat. I know what's happening now. And it was just another way for me to connect them to their Judaism. This was our on-base home in Japan. You could see a lot of people here. So my neighbors started approaching me. We lived on base, and my neighbors started approaching me saying, you know, our kids don't know anything about any holidays that aren't Christian. And it's always during the winter holiday season that people all of a sudden tend to want to know more. And they said, would you mind teaching us a little something about Hanukkah? And in the end, I said, well, why don't I have you over and put something together for you? In the end, I had about 40 people crammed into this teeny tiny base house. I had stations all over my house of different activities for the kids to do. I read a Hanukkah story to them, explained the story of Hanukkah, fried so many latkes. I think my house smelled like latkes for the following year. It was a truly incredible experience. The following year, my husband was out to sea, although I'm pretty sure he was out to sea for that one too. But for the following year, I was just exhausted. And I said, you know what? I just don't have it in me to do this huge party. Why don't I just have one or two families over every night for Hanukkah instead? This was so much more work. Don't do this. This meant cooking latkes every single day so that everybody can try them. This was crazy, but you can see that I have menorahs for everybody to light. And it was, looking back, this is a fantastic memory. These are lasting memories that my friends still share with me, their kids still talk about. I know Hanukkah. My friends over in that middle, all the way on the right picture, their son was pretty sure that he was Jewish and was insisting on bringing his dreidel to church for mass every Sunday. And they're like, no, no. They all walked away with dreidels and latkes and Hanukkah cookies. And it was just an amazing experience to be surrounded by people who wanted to give me the feel of a community while knowing that they were not part of my Jewish community. And it's something to be said for people who are always looking out for others. There's always something you can do to help people feel like they are welcome and they are loved. Which brings us to the command holiday party. Every command always has a holiday party that is ostensibly a Christmas party. Just because you call it a holiday party does not mean that it is, in fact, a holiday party. Usually that means Christmas trees, Christmas presents, Santa, somebody invoking the name of Jesus at some point. And it's very frustrating. especially when you're now bringing children to these events. As an adult, you can easily brush that off. As a child, it's more confusing. Well, am I not a part of this command? Because this is making me not feel like a part of this command. In Japan, what I started doing was bringing Hanukkah decorations and Hanukkah activities to the command holiday parties. And in Japan, I found the most amazing craft making origami dreidels. The best way to incorporate our host nation culture with our religion. I showed them how to light Hanukkah candles, and it was a great experience. And the command really listened. They set up a photo booth and even ordered Hanukkah props to hold up, which was just awesome. It was such a small change to make, but of an incredibly meaningful one. And as you can see from my children's faces, they felt like they were a part of it, that this was where they belonged. Something else I love to do is to incorporate the local cuisine into my Jewish cooking. This is a Japanese savory pancake called an okonomiyaki that was altered a little bit into a latke. And so now every year we make okonomiyaki latkes to remind us of the Hanukkahs that we spent in Japan. But it was lonely. We did have a Jewish chapel in Yokosuka, Japan. Which was great. And I became the de facto lay leader when everybody else moved, which is what always happens. We come, we go. When we first got there, there were quite a number of people. There was even another family with 3 young kids, and it was incredible, but they moved a few months after we got there. Many times I would show up to lead services on Shabbat, and my kids were the only ones sitting in front of me. It's a lonely feeling. My husband was not there. He was out to sea. It was just me and my kids, and they were far too young to even participate in the service. And it was just me listening to my voice echoing in an empty chapel. It's tough. It's a tough thing to do, especially when you're used to being surrounded by such a vibrant Jewish community. However, in between duty stations, we usually would go home to visit with family, and we found ourselves back in the Annapolis Naval Academy chapel where we got married, this time with 3 kids in tow. In this picture, you can see Rabbi Balaban, who was stationed with us in Japan. You can see our friend Loretta leaning down in front with Eliana and Dahlia. She is an ophthalmologist in the Navy. She was stationed with us in Yokosuka as well. And standing next to Yael are Rachel and Maya, 2 friends whom we were stationed with in Hawaii. Their dad and my husband went to the Naval Academy together. They were both in the Jewish Midshipman Club when they were midshipmen, and it all came full circle. We got to see each other again. It's such a small Jewish military community. When we get to reunite, it's just so sweet and so wonderful. To Germany. What ocean is in Germany? Well, my husband was doing something called a joint tour where you you work with another branch of the military. He was working on an army base. The Navy is far better. And we enjoyed traveling around. We made it to 17 countries in Europe while we were stationed in Germany. We were immediately welcomed by the Jewish community there. There was a lay leader who had been there for years. He was fantastic. They had this huge Purim party as soon as we got there. We were living out of suitcases in the hotel for about 2 months, and the congregation was kind enough to bring the girls some costumes to dress up in for Purim, which was just fantastic. This is our Passover Seder that was also great, led by that fantastic lay leader, who, of course, promptly moved shortly after we got there. And thus, once again, I was thrust into that lay leader position. I was the one leading services, and I got to teach the religious school. They had a religious school meeting every Sunday morning. I was able to create a curriculum of my own and teach that same curriculum to a classroom of students aged kindergarten to about 11, 12. So it was quite a range of students, quite a range of abilities, but it was so meaningful to have that ability to use my skills as a teacher, to use my knowledge as a Jew to bring that to our community there in Germany.
Someone in attendance asked, which city were you in? And if I recall from your writing, it's Stuttgart, isn't it? Or no?
Yes, we were in Stuttgart. We were about an hour and a half from France, where we would go for lunch, about 2 hours from Switzerland. It was a fantastic location. And we lived out in town in Germany. We were not living on base, which was a completely different experience. I have here a whole bunch of different macaroons. Why? Because there is a fantastic organization called the Kosher Troops. And what they do is send holiday care packages to soldiers and sailors all over the world and their families. And it was incredible to get, we got like 25 huge boxes of Pesach food. We would get huge boxes for Purim of Hamantashen and Grogers. For Rosh Hashanah, they would send us honey sticks and dried apples. They were incredible in their support of us, because these were not things we could find out in town. Something else we did with our kids while stationed overseas in Europe, we got the opportunity to take them to the most beautiful synagogues you could ever find. This synagogue was in Prague. They walked in and their jaws dropped. They were so used to walking in and out of cathedrals and churches that are worth seeing. They're gorgeous, but we weren't connecting to those. As soon as we walked into this synagogue, they looked around and said, Mommy, that's a Star of David. Mommy, there's a Torah in there. Mommy, and they were shocked. There are other Jews. They exist all over the world. They have always been the only ones, the only Jews in their school, certainly the only Jews in their command. This was an incredible experience for them. And I am so glad that we got to do it. This is another synagogue in Prague. This is a synagogue in Budapest, and we happened to stay right across the street from it. We were able to enjoy kosher food in both Prague and Budapest, which blew their minds. This is the great synagogue in Rome. We happened to be in Rome over Hanukkah, and we were able to celebrate with the Roman Jewish community. We sought out a menorah lighting and were able to join it in the Jewish ghetto in Rome, and it was an incredible experience. We also happened to bring with us a tiny little menorah with tiny little birthday candles, so we could light candles in our hotel room. Do not tell the hotel. And we continued our tradition of hosting people in our home. Although we lived out in town, you can see our ketubah is prominently placed in our house. You can walk into our house, you know we are Jewish. This family lived a few doors down from us. They are another American family. He was in the Army. He still is in the Army. They hail from North Carolina, South Carolina. I can never remember the difference between the two. But they, like many others I encountered in the military, had never met Jews before. This was their first experience. And so we invited them over. Come celebrate Hanukkah with us. Let us show you what it's all about, what we do. They loved the experience, and we loved the experience. It was very meaningful for all of us. As I said, I like to incorporate our host nation flavors into our Jewish cooking. I've made pineapple hamantashen, papaya hamantashen, guava hamantashen, the maltashen hamantashen, which is the traditional like poppy seed. That's very German. I was not able to find a good Japanese hamantashen filling, but I'm sure maybe if I think a little harder. I made it a point to make hamantashen every year. My kids know, oh, it's Purim. Purim's coming. We're making hamantashen. I believe strongly in the scents and smells evoking your Judaism and associating those smells with holidays. And I'm seeing heads nodding. It's so important for so many of us. And it's something you can do regardless of where you're stationed. I call these double duty napkins. I always write notes on my kids' napkins for school. Sometimes they're math problems for things they need to review. Sometimes they're Hebrew phrases or something related to the holidays that we are celebrating. My middle one has taken to writing responses to me on her napkins and bringing them back home and saying, you can throw them away, it's okay. But it's something that I was able to do to continue teaching them our Judaism, despite being the only ones. The last trip we were able to take while we were in Germany before everything shut down for coronavirus was to Israel. And it was, I mean, really the most perfect, ultimate trip for us to take before everything shutting down. They were astounded. Everybody here is Jewish. Everybody, we can eat any of this food. It's all kosher. And they were in for the surprise of their life when mom started speaking Hebrew to the shopkeeper on the street. They looked, I turned around and they were looking at me and they said, hold on. Mom, you speak Hebrew? And says, oh, yeah. More than just a phrase here or there, kids. It was a very wonderful experience. And I am so thankful that they were able to have it. Which brings us here to Spokane. Something I always did when we were overseas was go into their classrooms to teach about Hanukkah. I made sure to teach from a cultural perspective, not a religious perspective. This is the holiday we celebrate in Israel, to share it from that perspective, because I don't want my counterparts coming in to be teaching religious lessons to my kids about things like Christmas or Easter. This is a holiday we celebrate in Israel. Many people in Israel are Jewish, and I hand out dreidels to everybody. I teach them what the letters are and what they mean, what they stand for. I show them a menorah. We usually do a craft, and it's always been really impactful for the kids in the class. And my kids have always welcomed it, as have the teachers. Obviously, this was not something I could do last year, being here during coronavirus. So instead I said, well, how about if I do it virtually? And I sent in the dreidels, and instead we did dreidel spinning via the computer. And I was still determined and dedicated to teach my kids' classmates about our heritage and our traditions without ever having to step into the classroom. And those are my pictures for you.
Well, I thank you so much, Naama, for both sharing your perspective on, the life of a Jewish military family. I think a perspective that's not heard often enough in Jewish communities, and also just your enthusiasm and expressiveness, and how engaging those photos were and how evocative. I really appreciate that presentation a lot, and I want to say that one of our attendees asked during the presentation what the name is of the organization you mentioned that sent all of the holiday foods. Kosher Troops. Okay. Kosher Troops. Very good.
If you're looking for Jewish military organizations to support, and I highly recommend you do, Kosher Troops is the one that sent us all of those boxes full of goodies. And another one that is important to keep in mind is the Jewish Welfare Board. They are in charge of accrediting all Jewish chaplains in the military and all Jewish lay leaders in the military. They are a subsidiary of the JCC, and they are fantastic. In fact, the rabbi who married us, Rabbi Elson, he retired a few years ago. He was a career Navy chaplain, and he is now in charge of the Jewish Welfare Board.
Ah, very good. I didn't know that existed. So thank you.
Yes.
Well, we have a bit of time left in the hour, and I want to open it up for questions or comments from our audience members. I think you should feel free to unmute yourself, given the size of our group. So please, if you have any questions or comments, now is a good time.
Well, I just want to say, Naama, thank you for doing this. This is really informative, and it was really interesting to see your journey through the years and everywhere you've gone. I haven't had the same experience as you, but I am in a Jewish military family that gets to not be moved around. Air Force. Yes, but I definitely have had that experience of it. There's just, I remember telling someone once that my husband was in the military, and he said, "Oh, is he the only Jew in the military?" And I was like, it kind of feels like that.
Kinda, yeah. I
yeah.
can probably name them all.
yeah, like yeah, and so it's only once at TBS we had a couple of guys come through who were temporarily at Fairchild for something and came to services. That only occurred that one time, and it was pretty special. But I think what I've learned is, they don't, as you said, they're open for things, but there's not the presence there, and it is hard. It is too bad because they're like at Fairchild, they have one of those menorahs that they stick out in front of the chapel. That's it. That's all they do. And fortunately that's not the only thing here. But I think if you were someone who was temporarily stationed here, it would feel very lacking. And if you didn't have the ability to get off base and into Spokane, it would feel very, very limiting. So I definitely have also gotten a sense of what you've experienced, and I'm glad that you were able to create something really meaningful for your family. I think it's really nice to hear.
Thank you. It's nice to know that we have that connection. I didn't know that.
Okay. Anyone else? Any comments or questions for Naama?
Rosalind, I see your comment. Thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I also want to point out, I also made sure to pull some of our DVDs. Shalom Sesame and Rehov Tsum Tsum. We're a multimedia family over here. And now, Netflix offering all kinds of different holiday programming we can tune into. It's really been fantastic. And I think my point is, if there's a way for you to support Jewish military members, please do it, even if that's sending care packages before the holiday happens so they have the things they need. We have friends stationed in Naples, Italy right now, and I shipped off a box of Rosh Hashanah things that they were so thankful to receive. Obviously, you can get apples and honey in Italy, but just knowing that your greater Jewish community is thinking of you, knowing how hard she's working. This is the ophthalmologist I pointed out. She doesn't have time to go get apples and honey. That is not on her to-do list at the hospital there. So, and as head of surgery actually now. So, whatever you can do, and if you are interested in supporting a Jewish family stationed overseas, I am happy to give you a name and address where you can send care packages of things that they can't get. I'm loving going through Target and seeing that end cap of all ridiculously overpriced Hanukkah stuff. Oh my gosh, I could buy these stickers, I could buy these pencils. I couldn't do that in Japan. I couldn't do that in Germany. So having the friends stateside who were able to do that and then ship them to me and had the forethought to send them to me before, because it takes about a month to get packages, was really meaningful. And it was so helpful for us. Well, that's a great idea, Shirley.
That actually is. Yeah, I bet that would really be appealing for our community because we're so close to the base and because the military sort of culture is part of the cultural fabric here. And there are certainly folks in the community now and previously who have been military families as well. So I imagine that would get some traction.
Yeah, I can tell you, we had quite an uphill battle in Germany regarding accessing things for our Jewish community that all of the Christian communities were able to have no problem. I was in for quite a shock when, after a year of developing my own curriculum and paying for things out of my own pocket and doing all of these things, I happened to have a huge library of Jewish children's resources. The Catholic school programming was getting supplied with a curriculum, with textbooks, with teachers, with all kinds of things. And I said, hold on, where's our money? You're supposed to be treating us all equally. Why do I have to pay for everything out of my pocket where you're supplying everything for them? I had the same issue in Japan. I was making the challah for every Shabbat. And the chaplain finally said, well, what can we do to help support you? I said, well, we could really use the basic things we need to celebrate Shabbat every Friday. We need challah, we need wine or grape juice. He said, challah just isn't in the budget. I said, oh, okay. did you tell that to the Catholics for their communion as well? Or are there communion products supplied to them? And he thought for a second and he said, no, you're absolutely right. And he has since turned into a chaplain who has been a huge advocate for Jewish sailors. And I'm very thankful for his partnership. But oftentimes it takes speaking out and pointing out that things are not being consistent and we're not being treated the same way.
Well, thank you for doing that nudging and advocacy.
No problem.
Seems like it might come somewhat naturally to you.
Yes, it does.
Well, I was wondering, especially in the context of the journey you described to so many different places and communities, what is it like for you now to be here? And specifically, what is it like for you to be teaching Hebrew in Sunday school?
There are a lot of responses to that. And I think, first, I have to say how frustrated we were to move during a pandemic, finally have a Jewish community within our reach and not be able to access it in a meaningful way. That all I wanted was to not be that sole person in a chapel praying by myself. And yet here I was still in my home praying by myself, and it hurt. And now we have this tool of a vaccine, and we have these tools of masks, and we have these tools of social distancing. And our synagogue has done an incredible job making sure that we can all do these things safely. And I'm thankful that our synagogue is something like 90%, over 90% vaccinated, because that's one step closer. In fact, I just shared an article today of a military spouse saying, if you support our troops, you'll get vaccinated, because those are our troops who are being sent to care for these low vaccinated communities. Those are our troops being sent to fill in at hospitals where they don't have enough personnel. It was incredibly meaningful to then have this year of religious school and Hebrew school in person for my kids. They love it. They love going. Never once last year when it was virtual did they complain about signing on Wednesday nights or Sunday mornings. Never once did they complain this year. We've only had a few sessions. They absolutely love it. They thrive in a Jewish community. They feel like it's their home. And when we attended Simchat Torah services, Yael, my oldest, was listening as Neely was playing the drums, and I can't recall who was playing the clarinet as we walked outside the synagogue with the Torah, and Yael said, "This is the most incredible thing. I didn't know that this existed." And while that was the Simchat Torah of my childhood, it wasn't of hers, and it was her first experience getting to do that. And it's just been so meaningful to have a community again.
That is truly good to hear. I'm glad that you're finally able to have that after so many years of searching or waiting or trying to build some of it yourself.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, we're near the end of the hour, but if there are any other questions or comments for Naama, I just your time and all of your preparation, is so appreciated.
I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. My computer knows, oh, there's something important. Don't worry. Time for a new one.
Yeah, I would just add, because Rachel talked about her own experience with being, part of a Jewish military family. My family was not, but we did live in Germany for 7 years because my father was the director of a study abroad program in Germany.
Cool.
And sometime you and I can talk about that, but it is interesting the way in which being Jewish in Germany works so differently for different people, because of course there's a lot of, for some folks, a lot of, particularly if they have Holocaust survivors in their family, there's a lot of tension there between the warmth and welcoming and the culture that is so rich and some of the history that is, so terribly upsetting.
I can talk about that experience for a whole additional hour.
I'm sure you could. But sometime you and I should talk about it for sure.
Yes, definitely.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for attending today. And most of all, thank you so much, Naama, for giving us some insight into what your experience has been like.